politics, religion, finances, all the topics your grandmother told you not to discuss with friends. And now, your host, Matthew Dowling, and today's guests on Commonalities.
Well, thank you for joining another episode of Commonalities. I'm your host, Matt Dowling. My guest today is someone who most of Fayette County should be familiar with, my former colleague and good friend, Representative Ryan Werner. Ryan, thank you so much for being on today's program.
Matt, thanks so much for having me.
I wanted to give you an opportunity at the top of the hour here to give us a little bit of a self-biography. I don't know if new committee assignments that you may have that you want to share. I know that the start of the House session has been what I'll kind of call a little bit rocky. And for the listeners at home, I always tell people there's no surprises of the fact that, I was a conservative Republican. I am a conservative Republican. For the purpose of this show, I try to stay pretty neutral. But things just aren't the same as when I was serving there in the House. Things have definitely been a little rocky here at the start of the session. So why don't you give us a little bit of your background and maybe any committee assignments you have?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Yeah, so this is my fifth term in the State House. I represent the 52nd District, which is now consolidated to just be Fayette County. It's geographically, it's mainly northern Fayette County, and we did just get our committee assignments. We actually were just assigned them today, which is, as you mentioned, we're off to a rough start here. It's very late to receive our committee assignments, but will be on the Appropriations Committee again. I'll be on Consumer Affairs, and I will be on the Environmental and Energy Committee.
So, I just want to point out to people that may not realize committee assignments, at least for the 3 terms that I served in the House, were generally handed out during the month of December, and they were made official with an official meeting of that committee in early January. So you guys are kind of 3 months behind. Also happening today, as our listeners are listening, but we're actually recording a day early, is the governor's budget address. And so I wanted to ask you what you think, although, reports may be out by the time this episode airs, what do you think or anticipate the governor is going to put in his budget address? What are his key goals or takeaways going to be?
Matt, your guess on this is as good as mine. I'm going to have my ears wide open tomorrow to see what the governor has to say. I don't know if he's going to go the same direction as Tom Wolf. Now, Governor Wolf, it's not much of a secret that each year he proposed large increases in spending and often tax increases to go along with those large spending increases. I don't know whether Governor Shapiro is going to try to tighten the so-called belt on government and try to rein in spending, maybe lower taxes. I honestly, I'm not sure what to expect. I think this is his first address. I have to give him the benefit of the doubt for what he's going to do. I would hope. Look, we have a very divided government right now with Republicans having the majority in the Senate, Democrats having majority in the House. So the budgeting season is going to be very, very unique. So it'll be interesting. It'll be very interesting to see what the governor proposes.
So budget related question for you. I've been following the fact that the courts have found the way that we fund education here in Pennsylvania to be inappropriate. And they're looking for the legislature to make a correction to that. Do you think that's something that Governor Shapiro will address in his budget proposal? And, how do you think that affects our local schools in rural Fayette County?
Yeah, so that's a great point, and that's something that I think he has to address because that's the elephant in the room, right? I mean, education is as a former legislator, I mean, it's the biggest pot of money for our budget, right? Like it's a massive part of our budget. Uh, so I think the governor almost has to address this in when one way or the other. And I think it's a question mark for local districts, Matt. And it all depends on again the tone that the governor sets here with it. I have my own personal take on it. I'm not sure I disagree with what the Supreme Court ruled. I, I don't know if I say I agree that they had the authority to make that ruling, though. Which those are two things that I think people often in politics have a trouble keeping apart to say, "Oh, I agree with the Supreme Court ruling because I agree with their ruling." I will say that I don't think that they quite had the authority to do that. But the premise of it, I do agree with that, and that's that public education funding in this state is not fair, right? I mean, all you have to do is look at inequalities from one school district to another. And if you're looking at public education, Matthew, there shouldn't be a difference, right? Like we've said this time and again, like your zip code should not dictate the level of public education you get. There really shouldn't be a difference if there's public. But in our state, we have this vast difference. You have inner city schools and you have rural schools that are struggling. Yet you have some suburban schools, that have state of the art AstroTurf football fields, and you have other schools that can't buy basic supplies, and that needs to change. Regardless of how the Supreme Court ruled, the courts ruled, like that, it has to change. Uh, and I think it all goes back to something that I know that we had many discussions about, and that's property taxes, and that's one of the main issues that we have with education funding. The premise of that we put this on with the major part of funding on the backs of property owners and on local taxes. So I think we need to look at a bigger picture. I personally always believe that schools should be funded per student, right? Like if you're going to public school, like if you look at the number of students in each school, your funding should be predicated on each student. I mean, I think this also opens up the door for discussions about school choice. Um, there's a whole lot that's up in the air. You could look at the way that other states around us do it, Virginia or Maryland, but uh, I'm not saying I have the perfect answer, perfect solution for it, but one way or the other, it does have to change, and I do think that the governor has to address this.
So let's kind of peel a little bit more off of the onion and go a level deeper. There's a couple hot uh, button phrases that I want to have you kind of explain if you can, and that's fair funding formula and the hold harmless agreement, and then also a multi-part question. I've not read the actual opinion of the Supreme Court's ruling. I don't know if you've had an opportunity to do that yet, but was it predicated on the uniformity clause of the Pennsylvania Constitution? Because while you were saying you didn't know if the Supreme Court had the right to rule on it, I think if that was the key point that they were making, is that we were interfering with the uniformity clause, then I think that would give them the freedom to make a ruling on school funding. So, can you expand on some of those points real quick?
Yeah, so when you mentioned hold harmless, and again, as a former legislator in Fayette County, this was something that was important to us because it helped our schools maintain a certain level of funding, right? So we're in an area where our population is decreasing. We are not bringing in new people there, and um, the what I'm trying to say is that so the tax base here is not, say, the same as southeastern Philadelphia, right? Um, and hold harmless basically maintains our funding level. Now, when you're talking about the fair funding formula, basically any new monies that go into school funding basically bypasses the hold harmless funding. Um, I don't know if that if I can say if there's a better way to simplify that or not. Um,
Well, it basically it's saying that in areas where there's population loss, they won't lose any money, but areas where there's population growth, the new monies will be expanded upon, but they may be losing out on some. Yeah, you're completely correct. Rural Pennsylvania, we were worried about that hold harmless agreement, but really it does create inequalities because you have students that aren't valued or we're not paying the same amount into with state funding in the areas of growth. Now, where I always thought it was difficult to right the wrong of this ship was the fact that, you know, over two-thirds of our school districts were in areas where the hold harmless agreement was a positive to them, where they wanted to see funding stay the same because they were seeing a decrease. So that means that less than a third of your school districts are kind of feeling that pain. But to right that wrong, that means a huge expansion in education funding, unless would decrease schools in our rural areas.
yeah, that's absolutely right. In what you were mentioning about the Supreme Court, the rulings too, is yeah, the problem that the Supreme Court, when you're looking at the uniformity clause too, you're looking at it at statewide taxes because the local you can have a discrepancy in local taxes. So, for example, you can look at if you go to Allegheny County, for example, you pay 1% more on sales tax, and it's because of it's because of the property taxes, but uh, it just goes to the bigger picture of what I've mentioned before. The whole property tax system that we use to fund schools in the state is antiquated, and regardless of whether the court has the jurisdiction or doesn't have the jurisdiction to do it, it needs to change. That's where I'm at.
And I think there's a third rail of politics that exists out there. And trust me, I know, having just retired in November, we get more calls and letters about property tax elimination than probably any other issue. I know every telephone town hall I had, I could guarantee you that property tax elimination would be a question that I got on that call. And Representative Frank Ryan, who is a good friend of mine, classmate of mine, he just retired. But he was looking at funding education based on the taxation of people's retirements, which we don't currently tax here in Pennsylvania. And that's why I said it's kind of a third rail of the political game, because a lot of the elderly population that stay here in Pennsylvania stay here because we don't tax those private retirement funds. But I think what's dangerous is the fact that if, as we shift taxes away from property taxes to fund education, we're going to have to find something else. And going from 6% to 7% in a sales tax simply doesn't generate the amount of revenue that we need statewide to eliminate or even defray the property taxes that people pay.
No, and I think that's a great point, and that's often when people will ask, why can't we do anything about property taxes? Well, since I've been here, there have been multiple attempts, and the failure is always at exactly what you said. You have to replace the property tax with other funding or other taxes. So, and that always lies the issue, right? Some people want a higher sales tax to make up for it. Some people want a higher income tax. Some people want in between. You mentioned Frank Ryan had his proposal to tax retirement income, which I know isn't very popular with a lot of people. So that's where the discussions always felt. So, and then that's what I would always tell people. I said, if you talk to your legislators, you talk to other people, don't just tell them that you're against property taxes or want to eliminate them. If you're serious about it, you have to tell them, well, how else would you want to pay for the schools? Because if you eliminated property taxes, you would not have enough money to operate your schools currently in the state.
Well, we have to get to our first break, Representative Warner, but when we come back, I know we have more topics to discuss, so stay with us here on Commonalities.
You're listening to Commonalities, where guests find common ground through uncommon conversations. We'll be back after this brief break to recognize our sponsors.
I'm Melinda Delarose. As an assistant district attorney, I've protected Fayette County families and fought to uphold our constitutional rights. As a prosecutor and trusted local attorney, I've provided victims of crime with a strong voice and put criminals behind bars. My pledge to you as judge is to follow the law, always maintain the highest ethical standards, and to run a courtroom that's respectful of your time and tax dollars. I'm Melinda Delarose, asking for your vote for judge.
Paid for by friends of Melinda Delarose.
When it comes to buying a home, what you see isn't exactly what you get. That's why home buyers should call Dave Dowling at Grandview Inspections at 724-208-4108. You'll see colorful flowers, freshly painted walls, granite countertops, gleaming hardwood floors, and other touches. What you can't see is the cracks, ancient plumbing, dangerous wiring, or broken appliances that might be revealed when you hire a home inspector. And when it comes to home inspectors, knowing yours has the qualifications and experience needed should be your number one concern. Dave Dowling with Grandview Inspections is an architectural engineer with over 30 years of commercial construction experience and hundreds of inspections under his belt. A home inspection is an opportunity for you to hire an expert to walk through the home and prepare a report outlining the home's major components, what needs immediate attention, and what will require maintenance after you move in. Your home is one of your biggest investments, so make sure your investment is everything you hoped it to be. Call Dave Dowling at Grandview Inspections at 724-208-4108.
Is your business using analog strategies in a digital marketing world? If so, then contact Matthew or Rebecca Dowling at Coordinated 360 for a professional consultation, where we bring in-depth knowledge and functional expertise with a holistic perspective. Coordinated 360 provides digital marketing, paid ad and media buying services, web design, social media management, video production, and more for businesses, organizations, and political campaigns. With decades of experience, Matt and Becky at Coordinated 360 can help you craft your unique message and share it with the world. For a no-risk media evaluation and recommendations, call 724-320-2212 or visit us online at www.coordinated360.com. Find us also on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, or email info@coordinated360.com.
Are you enjoying the program you're listening to? Support Commonalities and help keep us on the air by making a donation of $5, $10, or $25, or any amount you feel comfortable sharing online at donate.commonalities.online. Again, that is donate.commonalities.online on the World Wide Web. Buy our host a cup of coffee or help pay for airtime at donate.commonalities.online.
Thanks for sticking with us here on Commonalities. I'm your host, Matt Dowling, alongside my guest for today, Representative Ryan Warner, who represents Northern Fayette County, the 52nd District. Representative Warner, there was a call for a special session to take place. And I think a lot of us that were sitting on the outside thought that may have happened in January. I think you guys thought it may have happened in January because you were showing up for scheduled days that ended up not happening. Can you tell me a little bit about that call for a special session, what a special session is, and what's the topic that people want to discuss in that session?
Yeah. So basically, a special session can be called upon by the governor or if half of both chambers call for one, they can call themselves into special session. And what special sessions are a different set of operating rules out of normal session, whereas you're just focused on one topic and you basically can't bring up other topics. So it's basically the laser focus in on one thing, and it avoids that topic from being changed or amended into something else. That's not to say that something's going to definitively get passed or has to get to the governor. It just limits the scope of what you're able to do and not do. So that's the premise of a special session. This particular special session was called upon. It was actually called upon by Governor Wolf, the first one, prior to Governor Shapiro being sworn in, and it was for the constitutional amendment to open up the statute of limitations for sexual abuse, childhood sexual abuse victims in Pennsylvania. And we were called into session for 3 days, and unfortunately, all the representatives traveled to Harrisburg, and the speaker ended up canceling session. That was canceled because of the whole back and forth of the speakership, having the majority of the Republicans and Democrats swinging at the same time. So it got us off to a little bit of a rocky start.
And so, that look back, as they refer to it, is something that people have been trying to address now for several years. Members, both on the Republican and the Democrat side, have introduced legislation. I know Representative Jim Gregory, who is a Republican, Representative Rozzi, who was Speaker for a short period of time, introduced legislation, and they were, particularly looking up to open that statute of limitations. And my question to you is, do you think that that's something that will get accomplished here in the next couple months, especially before budget time, or will the priority shift to the budget and this matter kind of be left to be addressed at a later date and time?
Yeah, that's going to be up to the Senate because it has been sent back. I mean, it's in their hands now. But I think I do have to mention, though, Matthew, when we were both here, this constitutional amendment was actually passed, right? So it was passed 2 sessions in a row, and it was set to go to the voters for referendum, as every constitutional amendment does, but it was not properly advertised by the Wolf administration. And because of that, the amendment legally was not allowed to be proposed to the voter. So it actually went through the course of the, which is very difficult to do in the first place, which is why we're taking this back up again and why it would needed to be voted on yet a third time, an unprecedented third time in a row for a constitutional amendment to reach voters.
In that area, that error would have fallen on the Secretary of State and the Department of State for not advertising properly, correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yes. Yeah, I mean, it was a very, I mean, there's no way to beat around the bush. It was just a very bad oversight, very bad.
So, we've been talking about childhood sexual abuse, and I want to move the topic to sexual harassment and sexual harassment by members of the General Assembly. I know this has long been a problem. We have seen the Me Too movement, which has come in and has been widely applauded, but also widely criticized because, we have some colleagues in the past that have received accusations of sexual harassment, but then they weren't able to file any charges or to substantiate those allegations. But now comes new allegations of a current sitting member, a Democrat from Delaware County, I believe, and I wanted to kind of get your perspective on what needs to happen. Should the House and the Senate be able to better police themselves and to keep their members in line whenever they step out of line and something like this occurs?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, absolutely, they should be able to better police themselves. But I mean, there's the opportunity is there now. Uh, I think the difficulty here, Matthew, is that the Democrats set a precedent, and I look back at Justice Kavanaugh when he was being um, during his nomination, right?
In the
And
confirmation period,
yeah, they're in the confirmation hearings. There was a certain precedent set there, right? And we can fast forward to look at the example of what's going on in the House. If Representative Zabel is indeed, actually done what he's been accused of doing, then yeah, he needs to step down. There's no question about it. I think the disappointing thing here is that the Democrat Party hasn't even acknowledged it, and they've known about it since December, January. I don't know but they've known about it for a few months, and you have to wonder: is it because they had a one seat majority in the House that they didn't do anything? So it's like, is it believe survivors and Me Too? I mean, that's their rally cry, but when one of their own has been accused of it, there was deafening silence. So, I mean, that's my observation into it is that their party should be handling this the way that they handle the other accusations. That's all.
Well, and I think there are a couple points that we have to make when we look at accusations of this kind. We all have a constitutional right to confront our accusers if we're accused of committing a crime against someone. So of course we want to hear Representative Zabel's side of the story. But therein question is, did something happen? Did something not happen? And, I've read that he doesn't plan to step down. He plans to get help or treatment for some type of health issue or issues, as some of the newspapers have reported. But they didn't say what those issues were. And I just think it's it's a little bit concerning that you have sitting members of the House under these type of accusations. And like I said, I don't think that you can automatically remove someone because they have a right to confront their accuser. And we do want to hear their side of the story. But what is or seems to be happening, I believe, is a little bit troubling. Now, when we look at this from a political perspective, I think the seat that Representative Zabel has, I know when I first came into the House, that was a seat held by a Republican, I believe, and then he was elected 2 years later. But we've lost all of those Delaware County seats as Republicans. Truth of the matter is, if the Democrats asked him to step down, that's probably not a seat that you guys as Republicans could even pick up. So I don't see a political downside to them calling out the situation and asking him to address it and to either step down or to prove his innocence.
Yeah, and again, I think that's just been the troubling thing is that their caucus has been just completely silent on it, Matt. I mean, it was, don't pay attention to the guy behind the curtain type of thing, right? That to me is a little troubling, especially when you just have a one-seat majority. But you have to think, even, if you have a one-seat majority, if you ask a member to step down and resign, you no longer have a majority until that seat's filled.
So it does make for some complications. We need to get one more break in here real quick, and then when we come back, I want to talk about your personal legislative priorities for the next session and let you kind of address some of the things that you're working on. We'll be right back on Commonalities.
You're listening to Commonalities, where guests find common ground through uncommon conversations. We'll be back after this brief break to recognize our sponsors.
I'm Melinda Delarose. As an assistant district attorney, I've protected Fayette County families and fought to uphold our constitutional rights. As a prosecutor and trusted local attorney, I've provided victims of crime with a strong voice and put criminals behind bars. My pledge to you as judge is to follow the law, always maintain the highest ethical standards, and to run a courtroom that's respectful of your time and tax dollars. I'm Melinda Delarose, asking for your vote for judge.
Paid for by friends of Melinda Delarose.
When it comes to buying a home, what you see isn't exactly what you get. That's why home buyers should call Dave Dowling at Grandview Inspections at 724-208-4108. You'll see colorful flowers, freshly painted walls, granite countertops, gleaming hardwood floors, and other touches. What you can't see is the cracks, ancient plumbing, dangerous wiring, or broken appliances that might be revealed when you hire a home inspector. And when it comes to home inspectors, knowing yours has the qualifications and experience needed should be your number one concern. Dave Dowling with Grandview Inspections is an architectural engineer with over 30 years of commercial construction experience and hundreds of inspections under his belt. A home inspection is an opportunity for you to hire an expert to walk through the home and prepare a report outlining the home's major components, what needs immediate attention, and what will require maintenance after you move in. Your home is one of your biggest investments, so make sure your investment is everything you hoped it to be. Call Dave Dowling at Grandview Inspections at 724-208-4108.
Is your business using analog strategies in a digital marketing world? If so, then contact Matthew or Rebecca Dowling at Coordinated 360 for a professional consultation, where we bring in-depth knowledge and functional expertise with a holistic perspective. Coordinated 360 provides digital marketing, paid ad and media buying services, web design, social media management, video production, and more for businesses, organizations, and political campaigns. With decades of experience, Matt and Becky at Coordinated 360 can help you craft your unique message and share it with the world. For a no-risk media evaluation and recommendations, call 724-320-2212 or visit us online at www.coordinated360.com. Find us also on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, or email info@coordinated360.com.
Are you enjoying the program you're listening to? Support Commonalities and help keep us on the air by making a donation of $5, $10, or $25, or any amount you feel comfortable sharing online at donate.commonalities.online. Again, that is donate.commonalities.online on the World Wide Web. Buy our host a cup of coffee or help pay for airtime at donate.commonalities.online.
Thanks for staying with us. I'm your host, Matt Dowling, alongside our guest today, Representative Ryan Warner, state representative for the northern part of Fayette County. Representative Warner, before we went to break, I said that I was going to give you the chance to talk about your legislative priorities. It's a little harder now. When I served in the House, having the Republican majority and having a Republican Senate, it wasn't easy to get legislation across the line, but at least it was our committee chairs that could make a decision to run one of the Republican bills out of committee. We had the speakership, which and the majority leader who was controlling the calendar, and then we could punt over to the Senate. So I know things will be a little bit more difficult, but what's on your radar or your agenda for the next 2 years?
Yeah, so I mean, you bring up some great points. It does not, not being in the majority does make things a little bit more difficult, but it doesn't make things impossible. I mean, having discussions with the Senate, I mean, there will be. I think because of this, you're going to see a lot of you'll see bipartisan package of bills, and having a one-seat majority isn't that big of a majority in sense of the fact that you do have some moderate Democrats that won't be able to vote with some of the far left-wing stuff that may be proposed from Philadelphia. So I mean, I'm going to continue to push forward because, again, the majorities can even change throughout the course of this session, right? So I'll keep advocating for the things that I've advocated for previously. I will continuously push the Taxpayer Protection Act. I know multiple conservative and good government groups have this at the top of their list as a piece of legislation that they push for. And the Taxpayer Protection Act basically just limits the amount of money that government can spend, constrains the budgets to a percentage of population increase and inflation increase. I'm working on a package of bills right now for combating illegal immigration, particularly going after sanctuary city statuses. Look, fentanyl is becoming such a major issue in this country. The drug epidemic in general is a major issue in this country. And if the federal government isn't going to do anything to try to stop that influx of drugs from coming up through the border, then I'm going to try here in Pennsylvania at least. Because that's one of the largest sources of the drugs coming into this country. It's coming across the border. And I'm also working on a package of good welfare reform bills. Namely, there's a bill I'm working on that deals with out-of-state EBT card spending. I mean, a lot of people would be shocked to know that there's EBT card spending in all 50 states and excuse me, in some of the territories in our country, including Guam. So, millions of dollars spent in Florida, millions of dollars spent in North Carolina, millions of dollars spent in a lot of vacationing areas that the taxpayers deserve to know why. So again, we'll be working on good government reforms, limiting spending, the illegal immigration stuff, and the welfare reform will be some of the stuff we'll be pushing forward.
Well, in one of the bills that I had worked on and had vetoed by Governor Wolf was one that I think would fit in nicely with the package that you were just discussing, and that was Medicaid work requirements for those that were able-bodied people. So I hope someone picks up the baton and passes that, and because we had bipartisan support whenever I had that bill, and I think it's something that a lot of people in our area, regardless of political party, would agree that able-bodied people should go out and at least look for work. And if they can't find a job, at least fulfill some requirements through volunteering or things of that nature. So, that's a bill I hope someone picks up and runs with, because we got it past the finish line and then got it to the governor's desk, and it was vetoed a few years back.
Yeah, we were actually just discussing that, and discussing that it was bipartisan. And you bring up a good point. It wasn't too over the top. We were just asking people to at least search for work if they were able-bodied.
And one thing I'll say about that bill, or a couple things, we had written into it exemptions for pretty much anything you could think of. If you were a victim of domestic violence, if you were taking care of an elderly parent that was on hospice, etc., we exempted all those people. And the key thing that I want to point out about work requirements is the fact that you have to get permission from the federal government to put those work requirements in place. And so passing this in Pennsylvania would allow us to apply for a exemption that would allow us to put those work requirements in place. And what's actually interesting is President Clinton, a Democrat, is who allowed for that process to even happen. This was legislation from his era that was allowed. It was then rescinded by the Obama administration and brought back by the Trump administration. I went to DC a few times to work on the bill with the Trump administration, but I do think that there's a renewed call for, as you called them, good government bills. We're getting to our last couple minutes here of the program. I want to give you an opportunity to tell listeners how they can get a hold of you. I know your office in Lemont, which was your main district office, had to move or has to move. So give us your contact information. Where can people find you? And if they need assistance with things like rent rebates or elderly people that want their discount on renewing their tags for their cars, how can they get a hold of your office and get that help that they need?
Yeah, absolutely. So our phone number has not changed. It's still 724-437-1105. You can more than welcome to give the office a call. Our main office did move because of the district changes, so we are now on Pittsburgh Street in Connellsville. So you can look for us there. That office isn't quite open yet. We'll be doing an announcement here. That office will be fully open here shortly. Our Perryopolis office is still open Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And you can also email us at rwarner@pahousegop.com.
Well, thank you so much, Representative Warner, for being our guest here on Commonalities today. Lots of luck to you, and I hope you enjoy and hear some good things in the budget address, which is scheduled for the morning that this episode will air. Thanks so much for being with us.
Matthew, thank you so much.
This has been Commonalities, a show where guests find common ground through uncommon conversations. Copyright 2022 Coordinated 360. All public rebroadcasts should be done with prior written approval from Matthew Dowling. All requests should be sent to info@coordinated360.com. Thank you for listening to Commonalities.